Okay. Hi, Ankit. How are you?
Good. How are you, Doug?
Doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Are you still in Sparks, Nevada?
No, I live in Aurora, Colorado.
Oh, okay. But you grew up in Sparks, right?
I did.
I've driven through there. That's a very beautiful place.
Yeah, it was nice.
You guys have cold winters, though. See, I'm in Las Vegas, and it's
Mm.
totally different weather up there. You guys are
Yeah, definitely.
cold and snowy in the winter, and your summers are not as hot, right? It doesn't get to 115 degrees in July.
No, no. It's yeah, the climate's totally, a lot different from Vegas. It's actually probably more similar to Colorado.
I think so. Is it up higher, the elevation?
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
Okay, that's probably why. And you had trees, I remember.
Mhm. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You are currently working as a nurse, is that correct?
I am. I
Okay.
am.
And you've also written a book. How many books have you published?
So far eight. There's one in process right now, which is a sequel to my children's book. But yeah, so far eight total.
Okay, are all your books in the same kind of genre, or are you just writing all different things?
Also a variety of different things. Children's book, some fiction, some nonfiction.
The book that we have here is called Desi Pilgrimage.
Yeah, Daisy Pilgrimage.
Okay.
It's yeah, Daisy's it's kind of a term used towards people of Indian descent, East Indian. I I think also can refer to people from places like Pakistan and Sri Lanka a little bit too. But yeah, it's a term used for Indian people.
Is the primary language in India Hindi?
It is Hindi. Yeah.
Okay. All right. According to your bio, it says that your parents were immigrants from India, so you were
Hmm.
born in the United States?
Yeah, I was technically an immigrant too. I was only a year old though when they moved, so pretty young when I came here. So I basically grew up here in the States.
This is their story, essentially?
Not exactly. It's I mean it's there's elements of their story and my story in there, but it's fictional. But there's a lot of I would say there are a lot of truths to it.
Okay, why don't you give us kind of an overview of the book, a little bit of a synopsis?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and pretty much as you would think, it's about a Indian family immigrating to the States, and it discusses them, immigrating into the culture of the United States, the challenges they face, and then also ultimately living the American dream, some of the challenges and prejudices they had to go through as well. But I wouldn't say I dwelled on that too much. But yeah, it's basically, I would say a very real life version of, what a lot of immigrants have to go through coming to the States, and primarily focused on an Indian family. And I would say, well, I wouldn't say it's a story about my family's life. For me, there are definitely elements of our lives incorporated into the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm just curious, what did your parents do when they came to the United States?
My mom ultimately started working for the Harris Casino out there in Reno, in the Reno Sparks area. Before that, she was, I think, maybe doing some babysitting, trying to find work, which is quite difficult. And then my dad, he started studying engineering again, which is what he did in India. Studied engineering and even worked as an electrical engineer. It was a little challenging to find work, at least in the Reno Sparks area, for engineering, even after he redid his education there. We could have moved and possibly gotten work, moved to somewhere else like California and found work. There was just some bad luck that kind of kept us from moving, but ultimately they had to do, work wherever they could. My mom actually worked for Harris for about 35 years. My dad worked a variety of different jobs, and then he owned an Indian grocery store for a while for about 11 years.
You had mentioned that he had studied engineering in India. When he came to the United States, was his education not valid in the United States?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, from what I've understand. Yeah, not very much. And he did study for several years at the University of Nevada, which is the local university out there. But even then, yeah, it was hard to find work in the Reno Sparks area. So, like I said, at one point I think we were considering moving to California when my brother and I were still kids, but just some bad luck kept us from moving. A lot of variety of different things, and ultimately we ended up staying in Sparks, which was fine. Um,
So in your book, Desi, am I pronouncing that right?
yeah, Daisy, Daisy,
Daisy. Okay. I keep wanting to say Desi, but all right,
yeah.
Daisy. Uh, is the main character, is it you, or is it a fictionalized version of you, or is it not you at all?
I would say probably somewhat of a fictionalized version, but yeah, and that's the thing. It's about the family in the book ultimately, moves to New York, where of course a lot of immigrants go, and there are just like my family. There's a mother, a father, then two sons. Um, the two sons I would say are vastly different in a lot of ways, which is also the case for my brother and me. We're similar in some ways, but also vastly different, just a few years apart. And then it discusses the various challenges that each individual go through. And I'm trying to figure out, like, if I had to pick a main character in the book, I would say it ultimately probably ends up being the youngest son, but he's kind of in the background the first half of the book. And then as he grows up and certain um, tragedies happen to the family, there are some tragic events that do happen. One in particular to the older brother, and then he ultimately kind of becomes the main character during the second half of the book. Yeah, so it's interesting because like also one of the things is the youngest son, he has certain dreams that he wants to pursue, like artistic dreams, and those are not well received by the father. And so like obviously his dad wants him to take a more traditional safe route, like going into engineering, but the son has, while he's very smart and talented and very good at math and science and all of that, and in school in general, he kind of has different interests. He doesn't really want to follow his dad's path, so that's a big theme of the book as well.
So his dad wants him to be a doctor or an engineer, and he wants to be a rock singer or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Well, I've heard that story. I think I've
Mhm.
lived that story actually,
Yeah.
personally.
And it's very big. It's usually
Yeah.
stuff like that, especially in Indian culture or Asian culture in general. It's stuff like that's usually not that well received.
Well, it's even in Western culture. It's there's a lot of that. I know I went through that with my mother. Definitely did. We just got a couple minutes left. Let me just touch on your other books. So some of your other books, give us an idea of what's out there under your name as author.
Sure. So I'll give you the ones that are currently available at my publisher because I'm in the position of transferring publishers right now. But my children's book, it's called "I Love Your Food." It's a pretty cool children's book I wrote a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's called "I Love Your Food." I recently wrote the sequel to that, which is currently in the publishing process. I also wrote a book called "I Love You, Apu." And I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was that whole controversy surrounding the Simpsons character Apu, the Indian American character.
I don't remember the controversy, but yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so like there was an Indian American comedian who basically called Apu a racist stereotype, outdated, insensitive. And he actually made a documentary about it as well. And my whole thing was, well, actually, Apu's not really a racist stereotype or an insensitive stereotype. He's actually very accurate, and he's also a very good representation of Indian people, in my opinion. And I talked about in my book some of the reasons why. He's a good father, he's a good family man, a good friend, he's a business owner, he's very educated, so on and so forth. So I kind of countered a lot of the claims that the comedian made in his documentary, and I just kind of provided my own version in my book. And I'm actually, a friend of mine and I are going to be working on our own documentary related to the book that I wrote as well. So that one's called I Love You, Apu. And they're all available at litgeniusbooks.com. That's my publisher.
Do you have a personal website that you want to give out, or do you want to use that one?
Yeah, Lit Genius Books is good, but I also have ankitshukla.org. That's ANKITSHUKLA.org. So people can definitely get a lot of my books on there and also message me if they'd like.
Okay, great. And the book Daisy Pilgrimage, that is out and available now.
It is. It is. Yeah, it's actually the first novel that I wrote too, and yeah, so I'm pretty proud of it. Someday I hope that could turn into a film because I think it would make a good movie someday.
Oh, how long has the book been out?
Uh, it came out towards the end of 2021, so just less than a year.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah.
How's it doing? You getting good reviews?
So far from the people that have read it, I wouldn't say it's definitely not a bestseller yet, but it's definitely the people that have read it really enjoyed it. And my mom actually read some of it, and he's like, "Yeah, wow, it does kind of feel like our story, but with different names."
All right, great. Well, you can't get any sort of better, I suppose, review or a more biased review than from mom. So you can take
Right,
that
right,
one way or the other, right?
right.
Okay. All right, Ankit. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you, and best of luck with everything you're doing.
Cool. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me.